I'll call the order of the Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, April 27, 2022. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Swanson?
Present.
Mr. Hess?
Present.
Ms. Polk?
Present.
Ms. Weber?
Present.
Mr. Payton?
Present.
Ms. Parker? Mr. Fairfield?
Present.
Mr. Featherling?
Present.
Mr. Duddle?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Long?
Present.
Mr. Hunter?
Present.
Mr. Raymond?
Present.
Mr. Wheeler?
Hello, Steve.
Good morning.
Mr. Seroy?
Good morning.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We have two requests for public comment. First, Apostle John Lee, is it? If you could come up to the mic over here, please.
I'd like to say good morning. Is it on?
We can hear you.
Okay, I'd like to say good morning to everybody. We decided to come out this morning, amen, just to get a little information, amen, and see what's going on in Kankakee County this morning. I'm Apostle Johnny Smith. My church is over there on the west side of Kankakee. We've been over there for 12 years now. I also have two businesses here in the city of Kankakee, and we just wanted to come out and get a little information to see what was going on in the city of Kankakee this morning, and just to say we appreciate all the aldermen, the mayors, and everybody, the good job that everybody has been doing in the city of Kankakee, how the city of Kankakee is building, we're growing, and we just thank God for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Thank you. Apostle Kenneth Orr.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Apostle Kenneth Orr, and I am the senior pastor of Real Love Ministries International Church, 147 North Washington in Bradley. I'm a resident of Bourbonnais. I have a insurance independently owned and operated business in Bradley, Illinois, 1044 North Street. I'm the only African-American owned and operated independent agency in the community. I had applied for some assistance through the KCR grant and I was denied, and I wanted to know why, because it was said that I have property in other states. So I'm a registered voter in this community. I am a taxpayer in this community. I got married in this community. I live in this community. I have my business in this community, and I pastor in this community. I have a food pantry that we feed. Through the pandemic, we fed probably over 2,500, 2,600 families in this community. So I live, serve, pay taxes in this community. So I just wanted an explanation of why I'm being denied help from this community that I serve. And that's my purpose of being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment, we have no presentations. The minutes have been distributed. Are there any corrections or additions? If not, a motion would be in order. Dunhill and Dr. Polk, motion to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Move to the Finance Department, Mr. McCarty. While Mr. McCarty's coming up, you have the miscellaneous financial reports in your packet, including the reports on sales tax, the reports on use tax, income tax, the personal property replacement tax analysis, inmate detainee bed rental program. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we'll start with the reports. Any specific information you want to share with us on the reports?
No, they're pretty self-explanatory. Still positive news overall. So hopefully that trend continues. So nothing specific unless somebody has specific question. We won't spend a lot of time on it.
All right. Questions?
Positive news.
I see no questions. Obviously, if you don't have questions now and you want to see Steve later, that'd be okay also. Cash flow analysis.
Yep. Cash flow is continues to do well, and as far as averages, no concerns. The next 3 months are really, we're into April for May and June, which is historically been our toughest cash flow months. If you look at the very bottom line, there's no concerns. So there at this point. So good news as well. So.
Questions? Seeing none. We have one claim not recommended for approval. Do you want to speak to that? Or do you want to
this is a credit card claim, if you will, activity. How it arrived to us. This is for the admin and Chairman Wheeler's. I don't know if the Chairman wants to share any insights on this.
Chairman, would you wish to say anything?
Just motion to approve.
All right, there's a motion to approve by Mr. Featherling, second by Mr. Dunnell. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Raymond?
No.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The monthly claims are in the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
Polk.
Mr. Payton, Dr. Polk. Any discussion on the monthly claims? Seeing none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
ARPA fund status. You want to speak to that, please, Steve?
Yeah, just an update for the current funding, meaning the first payment for both the ARPA fund itself and then the lost revenue fund, as well as, which will bring us, I believe, to the next item, as far as the original sub amounts of $250,000 for the one for the business and nonprofit fund and the other for the non-covered government unit funds. We have remaining balances, the ARPA business and nonprofit balance with the information through today, that is will come before us. We'll have $22,397 remaining, and then for the non-covered governments, from the original 250,000, there will be 15,000, roughly 700 left in that from that activity that the county board recognized and authorized, as far as to put aside for those activities. So that's an update. We do have information and communication from the Department of Treasury for the second payment. So there is an application process similar to the first one that we're working on, and I will let you know. We might have it by next meeting. I'm not sure, so we'll see. So, but we're getting close to the distribution of the second, what they're calling tranche. So.
As the committee will recall, when we set up the parameters for how we were going to distribute funds, we talked about the fact that as we saw what happened in the distribution of funds, we might be wanting to consider whether to make any adjustments. It would appear that at this point we may need to start thinking about doing something on that order. I don't know if this is necessarily the time we want to do it. Mr. Chairman, would you want to speak to that?
Yes, sir. That's why I was on the agenda, was
Okay.
to have the committee consider establishing or reestablishing these funds, just looking at the tax years of 20 versus 21. We did 19 versus 20. The second year of the pandemic was 20 and 21. Reopening up because some of the people that received, you remember there was a cap on the businesses and non-for-profits of 10,000. So maybe those businesses had continued that bad trend for the second year. So there was a thought of reestablishing, say playing out the string with this, the money we have here, let people still apply for this, but reestablish these funds and fund them at 250 and 250 like we did the first time. And they would take an action of this committee and then full board to do so.
Is the committee clear on the kind of proposal here that we have? We have a proposal in terms of moving so that we recognize what happens to entities in the second year of the pandemic. If we're clear on that, a motion to approve that authorization be ordered. Mr. Fairfield and Ms. Parker. Any questions on that? Mr. President. Just a minute, let me see if I can.
Okay.
I'm learning how to use this. Okay, we got the right mic.
Will that go back to 19 again still? Or is it gonna skip those 2 years and just start with 2021? You're gonna have
As I
19,
understand,
20, and then it's gone?
as I understand what we're proposing, we assume that the people that had something in 1920 have already made their applications, or there's a small amount of money left that they would use, they could still use.
Okay.
This proposal would apply simply to applications dealing with revenue and losses in the year 2021.
Okay. Thank you.
As compared to 20.
As compared to 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, if you,
For those that were previously approved, is it closed for them, or will it open back up since we're opening up another year? I'll just throw that out to the committee because we may have reapply. I mean, there's one thing to reapply if if for some reason they didn't qualify under the original one, but what about the approvals if they come and apply a second time? What is the committee's thought on that?
Yes.
We may have somebody.
Mr. Yeah, that was my question too. Is this new applications only, which I think it should be?
you would prefer it only be new applications. I saw some kind of heads indicating a different opinion, so we need to sort out what the preference of the committee is. Do we want it only new, or would we allow someone that applied and continue to have losses be able to apply a second time? Mr. Long?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did we not have a few that applied in the past and the rules have changed?
I'm sorry, I had the wrong one on.
So, did we not have some applicants that were denied and the rules have changed slightly since then? Would it not be okay for those persons to reapply as well?
Actually, the ride in Kankakee is one of those that we're reassessing because the rules changed on the Treasury side.
So we would not want to eliminate those people, correctly?
If that's the wish of the committee, to me it makes sense to not eliminate them. Yes.
So does that mean that people I haven't been able to make contact with for 19 and 20 are just eliminated then, and I can't contact them now for?
If their loss was in 19 and 20,
they're done.
One proposal that we're trying to clarify is whether those people that had losses in 1920 would be ineligible, or whether they'd still be eligible, and that's what the committee needs to decide.
Yeah.
If it's your sentiment and the majority of the committee says those that had losses in 1920 and haven't done it yet, then the committee would get to decide. Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you. If you use, like, say, bar, restaurant as an example, the pandemic exacerbated their problems over that 2-year period. So when my intention is to people that had a bad year in 19 to 20 because of the pandemic, that could have continued. So I don't think you should eliminate people and make it just only new people, because that could have been continued, especially in that sector that I just talked about. Yeah. Those places that were impacted by the, well, questionable mandates out of Springfield, arbitrary mandates and grouping of counties together to shut their businesses down. So that's why I think my suggestion was, when I thought of this, was to make it, you could reapply, because the pandemic didn't end for you the first year, it continued the second.
I hear the committee asking a different kind of question. I hear the committee asking the question, someone that didn't apply but had a loss in 1920, would they still be eligible to apply in this second round?
I heard both questions, to be honest.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I thought we were shutting
clarify.
down 19 to 20 because there's been a full year to apply to this point, and we've done extensive public outreach. If you don't know about it, it's been on the radio, it's been in the newspaper, it's been in public events, it's been in webinars, it's been on our website, it's been everywhere that we can reach beyond knocking on people's doors. So this would be kind of put that one to bed so we can focus on the second year of the pandemic. We can't budget properly and know what we have to spend and what we can allocate if we have this big swinging open door for 19 and 20. That's my opinion, and that's for the committee to decide.
We need clarification on what the wishes of the committee are. Mr. Feathering?
Who made the motion?
Well,
I thought we had a motion.
we have a motion, but we're trying to clarify the intent of the motion.
Okay. Well, whoever made the motion should clarify it then, right?
Mr. Fairfield, you made the initial motion.
I think we should limit it to the 2021 and possibly.
I'm sorry, I need to have your mic on.
I think we should limit it to the 2021 and also maybe think of the 19 and 20 if we need to add a few more dollars into that fund that is left over and give us a 6 months moratorium.
I would rule that that'd be kind of a separate motion, and it would be appropriate motion, but.
Well, I was making that motion, but maybe after we get done with this, we can talk about the second statement I made,
Okay.
is what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think to keep things as clear as our intent as possible, that should be a separate motion.
Okay.
All right, so that is the intention of the person that made the motion. Are there any questions or further discussion? It would be possible to amend it if you didn't want it to go a different way.
Just a clarification, did Mr. Fairfield say it's only new applications for the 2021? Is that what the motion says?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I need clarification. Applications or applicants? Because the intent of this was to have the same person could apply even if they received money in 19 and 20.
Is that what you're?
Yes.
Yes, but it's only an application for 2021.
If they have losses in, if they have losses in 21, then they need to apply again and would be eligible. It doesn't matter, as far as I was concerned, if they apply in 19 and 20, just they should be applying for the 20 losses or 21 losses.
And Ms. Parker's agreeing with that.
I was the second. Yes, I agree.
All right. Any further questions there? This is simply setting policy, but we are going to be spending money for it, so maybe it's better to.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Hunter.
This is Hunter. Can you clarify the motion again? Because sometimes I've heard a lot of things being said.
I understand.
Some of that stuff was clear as mud.
This is an authorization to set up the same monetary structure that we had with our first program funding motion, but it would apply to, it would apply only to applications and income expenses during the year 2021.
Okay. I'm fine.
Any other questions? Let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker? Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling? Mr. Dennell? Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Raymond?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Anything more you have under this section?
Were you gonna take out, had that second, the 19 and 20, he brought up 19 and 20, were you guys gonna discuss that, or do you want me to?
Okay, yeah, that's right. Mr. Fairfield, you talked about maybe putting more money in the 1920.
Yes, I thought maybe we could put another $50,000 in each one and keep it open for another 3 to 6 months, whichever.
Is that a motion you'd like to make?
Yes.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Payton seconds that motion.
We need to decide,
Mr. Wheeler?
It has to be 3 or 6 or 4 or 5. It can't be 3 or 6.
That's what I was gonna say. We'll do it for 6 months.
So it'd be 6 months after the full board meeting.
Yes.
That'll be if this is approved, it would be 6 months from that date. Okay.
Is there any questions, discussion on that?
Now, how will that information be disseminated? I mean, like everything else has been regarding the program?
Of course, yes.
Okay. I was just wondering if there's any special articulation to the public regarding the extension and the additional funds being placed in there. So I'm fine.
I think we can do it through the communication that has already been ongoing. All right, let's have a roll call on that then, please. Oh, that's right. Did I add a second on that? Mr. Featherman, did you second that motion? Okay, Mr. Featherman seconded the motion.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Excuse me. Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling? Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Raymond?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Anything more under that section?
No.
Okay. We move to the ARPA funding requests.
Yeah, we have two, but not recommended for approval this morning. And just a reminder to the committee for small businesses, the small business category under the federal ARPA plan. One of the primary aspects is fiscal impact. And we've been determining that by tax filing. And also, since each county received funds, we're also tasked with making sure, that it's a county business. And we've been using tax forms for that. So the two before us today, that your covered insurance agency first of all, did not meet the fiscal impact. The business did better in 20 than in 21, I'm sorry, in 20 than in 19. So we're still in 19 and 20. And we received, when the original application arrived, the business tax returns have a Gary, Indiana address on them, as well as the W-9 that we were provided for that. So So those are the two reasons for those. Do you want to take them one at a time, or do you want
I think
to do
probably best.
both? Okay.
Any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a question. Is that the same business that the gentleman spoke on public comments or not?
Yes.
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
Okay, now let me be clear. Now, did I hear it correctly that the filing was under a different state?
Yes, the original tax forms that we received had a Gary, Indiana address.
Okay.
Any other questions?
How can you do that?
Motion to approve with not recommended would be in order. Is there a motion to approve the not recommended? Or is there questions still?
Be a motion on the floor. I'll make the motion to not approve.
Okay, not approved, it's second. Mr. Featherling, discussion, questions?
Yes, this
Yes,
is
Mr.
Hunter.
Hunter.
Have there been any discussion with the gentleman who made application in terms of what the errors were with his submission, and counseled him in terms of what needed to be done, not to falsify anything in terms of, showing that the business was generated in Illinois versus Indiana? Had there been any discussion with him in terms of how might it be done in a more appropriate fashion and legal fashion? Mr. McCarty, did you have a discussion with him at all?
We're limited on the small business with financial impact. So unlike a non-for-profit where their outreach could be multiple angles of funding, the small business aspect is strictly limited to financial impact. If there is additional financial impact in underneath the new 2021 program that the board is now establishing, that could be reassessed for 2021, but we assessed the 19 and 20 at this point.
Okay, I'm clear on that, and I don't have any problems with what's being articulated.
The financial impact is part of the federal guidelines, right?
Yeah, that's all part of the federal.
So those are not guidelines we established.
No, that's part of the federal, yes.
Any other questions? All right, we have a motion for not recommended. A roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker, Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling, Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter,
Aye.
Mr. Raymond,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler,
Aye.
motion carries.
All right, next one.
All right, next.
Is for Babylon Industries. It was a request under the small business aspect, and it was for 501c3 application expense. So the two things there that was presented to us on this application, the business income improved, so it didn't meet the financial impact. And then also the 501c3 application expense is not an eligible administrative expense under Arpa. So that is the 501c3 could apply separately, but in this case they applied underneath the business, so it falls underneath the small business aspect and not the 501c3 or non-for-profit category. So we had to take it as the small business category. So.
Is there a motion in terms of not recommended? Mr. Wheeler, is there a second? Mr. Fairfield? Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Ms. Polk.
Aye.
Ms. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Ms. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Dennell.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Mr. Raymond.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on.
So lost revenue, we have none today. And then ARPA, there's an amending resolution, previous resolution from October for the State's Attorney's Office and digitization of files. I believe that's in your packet. I don't have it.
Yeah, it is.
I don't have the, I forget. Kelly, or do you have that? Okay. What the changes? I forgot to grab it. Okay, so the original one is in there, not to exceed 34,000 is there a number that is changing to, or needs to be changed to?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Wheeler.
before we answer that question, is someone from the state's attorney's office here?
Yes.
Is this a personal service or is this bid required?
In this case, it would be a professional service because of the nature of what we have to scan. This is not scanning papers through a scanner. This is changing media into digitalized storage, digitalized files that we can store. We did reach out looking for companies, and there were companies that could not do this because of the nature of the items that we need to have digitized. So we're looking at it as a professional service because it's more of a niche thing than just scanning.
Thank you. I just want that on the record so he can read that amount. It's, well, I can't. It's 68,055 is the quote. Because we've done that before where we release the quote amount before we say it's a bid. What's the point of a sealed bid at that point? So I will say that I would view the planning department in the same manner. So then we shouldn't have to go out to bid for all the planning department's digitization as well. They had 3 quotes. That should be fine as far as I'm concerned. So I don't, and it's just, I'm having that discussion here so there's no surprises because many people are on PZA and we've discussed that. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Hunter, Ms. Weber for a second. Any discussion? Yes, Ms. Weber.
I wondered if the 68 is in addition to 34 or it changes from 34 to 68.
If you could speak to that, please.
The 68 number is in place of the 34,000. So that was originally the first number we got when we thought it was just scanning, but now that we have to work with other media, you know, the old videotapes that we used to get and stuff like that. So that jumps the number to 68. Thank you.
And that was my understanding in my motion.
Okay. Any other questions? Discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Ms. Polk.
Aye.
Ms. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Ms. Parker. Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Dennell.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Mr. Raymond.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Okay, next.
Next one would be Wright in Kankakee. So this was a previous application that we communicated out with them and do the change from at the Department of Treasury on the federal side. Their request for replacement of their air conditioning units can now be considered. They are a non-for-profit, so it falls within the $10,000 cap for nonprofits, and this would be under reimbursement only. So we will request proof of
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Hunter, second by Mr. Donnell. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson, Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker, Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featheling, Mr. Dunnell, Mr. Miller, Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter,
Aye.
Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Next.
Kankakee East Side Junior Football League. They had a request for 10,000. They provided us with their financial information, and their impact was greater than 10,000. So their eligibility is 50 with the 50. Excuse me, the 50% reduction within the municipality is eligible for 5,000 funding.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Hunter, Dr. Polk. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson, Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker, Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featheling, Mr. Dunnell, Mr. Miller, Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter,
Aye.
Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
And the last one?
The Kankakee Regional Land Bank request for $20,000. I will let somebody else explain this one though.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. This was came as a result of the land bank is now formed. The board is formed, if you will, starting to get moving. This funding request was for seed money to acquire property, residential property, to start the land banking process, which is to get something that is, as an example, boarded up, get liens, taxes, everything wiped away, back taxes, and get it into the hands of either a developer, owner-developer, to get it back on the tax rolls. So in order to do that, you got to do a little bit of legal work. Depending on, you may have to, pay someone $3 or $4 grand to get out of the way of the property. But the goal is to get it onto the tax roll. So this, the city of Kankakee will be doing something similar with this. I don't know the exact method they're going to use, but we're countywide. That's why it's 20,000, and we've targeted areas that we're going to do this in. But the city obviously has a big stake in this as well. So that's why it's coming here for this committee as a governmental unit. It is a governmental unit, by the way. It's not a not-for-profit.
Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Weber and Mr. Parker, seconds. Any discussion? Ms. Weber.
Thank you. I noticed on here, it's the reason is 3.10. Can you tell me what 3.10 when it says?
Yeah, it wasn't in our packet. That page.
Housing support, affordable housing is the category
Thank you.
I was referencing.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, Hunter.
Yes. Mr. Hunter. Go ahead, Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, Andy, you got a question, and you may not be able to provide specificities. We're kicking in, the county's kicking in 20,000, and this land bank is a county entity. Has there been any kind of assessment as to the impact, meaning that a place like Bourbonnais in comparison to the city of Kankakee, has a proliferation of literally hundreds of boarded up properties. So is there any method to the amount that the county is kicking in versus, let's say, the city of Kankakee?
To start with, we are available. We were discussing seed money to get the ball rolling. It's not a county organization. I want to make sure we got that's clear. It's a separate governmental body.
I understand.
Yeah, I just want to make sure this isn't like the county's not, we have appointees on the board, so does the city. The main focus is with this funds are going to be the residential side of things, and we could deploy those within the city of Kankakee, or the land bank, excuse me, can deploy them in the city of Kankakee, or they can be deployed in the rural areas of the county, which is our jurisdiction. We can't do anything in Bourbonnais, we can't do anything in Bradley or Grant Park or Mantino or anything else like that unless they were to join the land bank down the road. So typically also when you're talking about a development, let's say building X, where there's 7 figures of liens on it, it's a commercial property, some bank thinks they've got, you know, a $5 million property where it's not worth $120, and it needs a lot of work with back taxes and everything else. Usually the city will come in with a deal, if you will, and they will fund that deal to get it in the hands of a developer. The big thing is getting rid of all the liens and the back taxes that allows a developer to actually do the property instead of paying the back taxes and liens. It makes it more viable to get it back on the tax rolls. I hope I explained that properly, because
you did.
We need seed money for the legal expenses and the title work, but you also need to make a little profit on that to the developer, because that allows you to pay for the executive director and go out and buy more property. That's your incremental sales, keeps it going.
Right. And let me ask you this. And I understand this whole thing is macro. I understand. But how might we be made aware of their activities?
It's a public meeting, posted agendas. And when they get up and running, these projects are going to be very visible. So there's one under discussion that's very visible right on Court Street. You know, there's other things that are happening, but they first needed to organize, get their bylaws together, make sure they had full elected positions. Now we're ready to start, or they are ready to start moving in that direction.
Okay, will they provide us with minutes as well too?
Oh yeah, have to. Yeah.
Okay.
Currently the secretary is Barbie Brewer Watson. That's Kankakee's appointee. Right. So we've got all the minutes. You have to have that stuff. So.
Yeah, I know that they are required to have minutes. I just want to make sure that, you know, we as county board members, you know, based on the monies that we're allocating for seed money and additional monies that we provide, that we will be getting minutes like we do with any other activities in county government. That's all I was asking for.
Yeah, maybe we have them report on a quarterly or semi-annual basis to community service or something to say what's going on.
I agree, and something, or even something, or something like this, Chairman Wheeler. You know, for example, when Tim Nugent came and made a presentation before, I think he made the presentation before the entire county board. That's something that maybe should be requested of us to them, so all of us are hearing the same information together. And I like your idea of them coming maybe quarterly and making a report.
Any other questions or discussion? Now, as I understand it, their vision may well be to focus on commercial properties first before residential. It's not our decision to make, right?
It is not. We can bring opportunities to the land bank, and via our you know, standing in that organization, because it doesn't work without the city and it doesn't work without the county. If either one of us goes away, it implodes. It doesn't work. You need both entities, home rule and the trustee, you know, for all the property. So but we can look at opportunity. It's opportunity driven, and it's also strategic, because you don't necessarily want to do a house here, a house here, a house here. What about the clusters of houses that changes a whole block? That's where we're at. Is we're in the identification phase with the city of exactly where the boarded up houses, not the vacant lots, the boarded up houses. That's your big opportunity. In the rural areas, we've got places identified. I've got little blocks zoned out by Pembroke Township, the north side of the river by the state line. You know, there's some undeveloped, you know, areas out there that have some boarded up houses with can't find the owner, you know what I mean, that kind of stuff. So we've identified those pockets in the county, but it's really the land bank that's making that decision. It's their call.
Their call.
Yeah.
Any further questions, comments? If not, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Do you have anything more?
Just real quick, we ran into this late yesterday afternoon. It's Arpa related. Chris is doing the required quarterly filing, and we've been on webinars. We try to hit the webinars for Arpa because all these changes as much as we can in GFOA and UCCI. We within the last 2 weeks missed this. The Treasury now changed all of the codes that are in our application packet that we've been following. So we now have this was the old one, this is the new one list. So we haven't fully assessed it. We may have to now update the applications again. But what's also happening is more information is now, so on the 1st in January, we did the filing and, got a sense of what it was going to be like. Now we're doing and adding to projects and things that they're asking for. And now demographic information on some of these codes is now showing up. So that's taken us even longer and unexpected as far as having to go find and do. So we might, especially with the community services part, we might have to have a conversation, and look at this a little bit differently in a bigger picture, and because the filing and what the Treasury's asking for in these quarterly reports is changing as we speak as well. So I've never seen anything like this. This changes every time we turn around. So we're doing our best to stay up with it and try and, but it's obviously changing. The UCCI, GFOA people that are trying to help everybody, it's even, it's changing even beyond them, because none of the other webinars mentioned this change, until we were filing, and then all of a sudden there it is. So, that if you see other applications and stuff coming down the way, that's why. We'll try to keep up with it the best we can. So.
Well, so far, what information I have, you're doing a marvelous job, and I think this committee has expressed its opinion before that if we need to use some of the ARPA funds to help with some of the administrative costs,
we're thinking about that
make sure
because
that
this is an ever-changing.
You provide us with the information so that we can authorize whatever needs to take place, because we appreciate the way in which you've done this well, and we want to keep it being done in the best way possible.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Lear?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCarty, you referenced demographics. I mean, in what context are they asking for that information? Could you define that, or is that defined?
Well, the project that it came up on was the Pembroke Sewer Project. And it asked us for the area's median income and the county's median income.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that's the first one we've crossed at this point, and that's what it was requesting. And it didn't ask when we set the project up in January, but it asked when we this quarter.
Well, that's easy. Your response is easy. On that one, I'm sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this mean that we potentially could have to go back and amend all of our resolutions with the new codes? You see where I'm going?
Yeah,
we were putting 4.1 or 1.3 or in the resolution.
They're allowing it to, like I said, we were trying to assess this last night, but these resolutions that are before you today, I was using the old code, so we might want to try at least get the new ones in, in with the resolutions going for these today. That's a great question. I'm not sure at this point. We'll definitely need to look at it.
We'll know for full board.
Yeah, and then maybe make a list or something. Yeah. Chris, he adjusted on the filing. At this point, it's hard to tell.
All right.
It's a good question. That's all I had. No, sir.
All right. If there's nothing for Mr. McCarty, we'll move on. Treasurer's Office. Mr. Africano? You have the treasurer's report that's been made available to you. Good morning.
Morning.
Let's go ahead and have a motion to combine and approve the reports. Mr. Long
Polk.
and Dr. Polk. Any questions on combining and approving the reports? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
It's nice to be able to see everybody's face instead of the backs of the chairs. Steve, I hope you're feeling better. All I have is that we've taken in approximately, well, it's heading toward 1,000 prepayments for taxes, which we're pretty happy about. We're continuing to try to push internet payment, and that's rising every year. And tax bills will be in the mail approximately May 20th with a June 30th due date, first due date. Other than that, things are going well. I want to just actually say that my office will be intimately involved with the business aspect of the land bank. And oh my God, is that a great concept for us. I mean, to get a property back on to the tax rolls is incredible if we can make that happen. There are a lot of properties, they don't generate any, not only do they not generate any income for taxes, they create the most amount of work in the office. So they're actually, they're a negative drain, right? So they're not creating taxes, but they create all our work in terms of selling them and certificates, sale and heirs and these sorts of things. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we might be able to put some businesses and homes back on the tax roll. So that's all I have.
Any questions for the treasurer? Mr. Wheeler.
I don't know if it's appropriate to mention now or once we get it more together, but the whole sale and heir insurance, or not, excuse me, interest business that's out there that we are used for our sale and heir possibilities on these little slivers of land. I don't know if you want to, because you'll have to come back here for this committee to approve.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
You know those little like little pieces of property that you can never do anything with?
Right.
The sale. Well, people go out and buy those. They sit on them.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have to pay them interest when the sale and heir comes in.
Right.
It's a business model.
Right.
They have no intent of ever doing anything with them.
I guess a quick primer would be, a lot of people don't understand it. There's two tax sales. Number one is tax surplus auction, which is properties that our trustee has that we then auction to the public. But the tax buyers are people who are buying tax liens. Right, they're buying a lien on unpaid taxes, and that's a whole different ballgame. That goes from 18% to 0. It's a reverse auction, and for most people, it's I'll bite my tongue on that. For most, it's just an interest game, right? So there's a lot of research done, and the perfect person is someone whose taxes have been delinquent, who have been purchased by a tax buyer, and have been redeemed. When they get redeemed at the clerk's office, they get their interest payment. So we essentially collect interest for the tax buyers. We're the people that collect it. They give us the money for the taxes, but at the end they get everything back plus interest. So that's how it works, and that's why a property you'll see, never gets purchased, because it has a history of never being redeemed. But there's nothing better to them than a property that continues to come in and come out and come in and come out because they're making money. And what sometimes will happen is they'll bid 0% on a property in this when we sell them, which in the beginning was like, well, why would they do that? What it gives them is the opportunity next year to prepay the taxes, so they can beat the taxpayer to the payment of the taxes. They have first right. They can do it whenever they want. Then there's an automatic interest payment. So it's a real sophisticated game business.
Yeah.
And it creates an amazing amount of work for us, because what a tax buyer will do is they'll buy someone's property in the best deal, right? This is great. They don't really want your property, right? They want the interest. They want you to redeem it. But if by chance you don't redeem it, and now we're getting toward that 3-year mark where they have to apply for a deed and then take the property, because that's what the law states, then they say, oh, look, there's a lawn mowing lien from the city of Kankakee, so we're out. And they back out, and then they still get their interest on their money. And we're stuck now with a property that's been sitting for 3 years. So it's heads I win, tails you lose, for sure. So
the whole point is like ways to synergize that open door basically with the land bank and what they can do, and maybe there are ways the two can work together to maybe make it those properties aren't available.
Exactly.
You know, and then we would be asked to, hey, it's this amount of money, it's in our favor based on those interest payments to actually fund these going over to the land bank.
There has to be a way for us to take property that doesn't generate any tax income and be creative, as creative as we can be in a legal sense, to create an opportunity to make those tax generating properties. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's no more apparent than in Kankakee. And the more that are not tax generating, the larger the burden becomes on those that pay their taxes. Mm-hmm. Right? Joe, you understand that, right? As a Kankakee resident.
Mr. Payton.
So is that a state law that needs to be changed?
Boy, that's a tough one, Sam. There's so many different ways of doing it. Chicago has a whole different way of doing things. It probably is, but I wouldn't think it'll change. It's so ingrained in the state, the tax buyer system, and it's huge money. There's guys that come in here, and I don't know if anybody understands this, that walk downstairs and write a check for $2 million.
Right.
I mean, these people are not. And then they package these deals up and sell them then off as investments, right? That's how we got in the real estate problem, crisis. So they'll package up a bunch of these delinquent properties and sell them as an investment vehicle because there's a guaranteed interest rate. So, but it's not good for our community at all. So when Andy came and talked to me about this idea, anything that we can do to move property back onto a tax roll, however that happens, is a good thing.
Chairman Wheeler?
Yes, Mr. Hunter.
And Chairman Lear, this may not be the appropriate venue to articulate my question and a request. And I understand what Treasurer Africano's indicating and what the mission is of the land bank is to take these properties and put them back on the tax roll. My recommendation, my desire would be to see if we could collaborate also with KCC and the skilled trades unions. And you ask, well, why? Why KCC and why the skilled trades? If indeed those particular properties, especially the residential properties, or even the commercial properties, are incorporated into the land bank, if indeed those properties are taken, why couldn't there be some kind of training component built in for individuals who could learn certain trades in terms of plumbing, roofing, carpentry, and so forth? Not only would you be affording the opportunity for training with the land bank, and restoring the properties back to viability and being placed back on the tax roll, you're affording certain individuals an opportunities to learn some skilled trades. So that's something to think about, Chairman Wheeler and Treasurer Africano, and those individuals who are on the Land Bank Committee. Something to think about.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
All right,
move on.
thank you.
Sheriff's Department? You have the sheriff's monthly report in your packet. That's been approved at Criminal Justice.
That's why the 20 grand, that's what it goes for.
Good morning. What review can you give us?
Really not much. I mean, the report speaks for itself. I think the positive out of anything that's on this report right now is that our revenue is not quite as low as what we thought it was going to be after the state of Illinois prevented us from housing for ICE. As I reported to the Criminal Justice Committee a couple weeks ago, we are actually housing some inmates from Champaign County, which has offset some of the loss that we thought we may incur. So that's certainly a positive thing. So if you have any questions specifically on the report?
That's not designed as long-term. That's because of some remodeling they're doing?
It depends on the definition of long-term, I guess.
Okay.
I think we're talking, the last time I talked to the sheriff in Champaign County, which was a few days ago, I mean, we're looking at outward of a year or so.
Okay.
So
That's good.
Long-term for now. We'll see what happens in another year. You know, the other issue to keep in mind is that pending litigation that is at the appellate court level now regarding ICE, actually oral arguments, I believe, are being heard on May 18th, so that is still active as well. So.
Okay. Any questions on the report? Seeing no questions, do you have anything else you want to
yeah, just a couple things. The Chairman Wheeler and I had a conversation about whether or not this committee needs to hear from me every month regarding our revenue, and I think originally we were here to talk mainly about ICE. I mean, I will, more than likely, I will be here anyway, but I don't have to come up here and, you know, let you know what you're seeing in front of you. I'll be here to answer questions, and more than likely, based on past history, probably be here to answer to some claims that aren't recommended for payment. So I will be here anyway. But I think from here on out, unless things change, I mean, I certainly don't, I mean, your time is as valuable as anybody's, so if I'm sure everybody in here would be happy to make these meetings shorter. So I'm good with that. I mean, I still report to the Criminal Justice Committee, and so unless, like I said, I will more than likely be here about every meeting anyway.
Chairman Weaver has had a discussion with me also, and I think this is an appropriate change given the
absolutely.
we've done things.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna, you will not be officially listed on the agenda.
That's fine with me.
Future meetings.
I mentioned at the Criminal Justice Committee about vehicles and the purchase of vehicles. The state bid contract pricing will not come out until May. So it's more than likely something that I'll bring back to Criminal Justice once we get those prices and come back to maybe request, no maybe about it, probably request vehicles for this year. But until that price comes out, we can't do anything anyway. Two things to keep in mind. A, we don't know with the increase of vehicles pricing, we don't know what that contract price is going to be. And secondly, we don't know what the availability of those vehicles will be. So we're kind of battling two things at once here. So, but I will definitely keep the Criminal Justice Committee up to date. And as with anything, if any of you ever have to get a hold of me or have a question, certainly call. We'd be more than happy to answer it anytime. And then lastly, we are anticipating a payment from the Illinois Department of Corrections for housing their inmates that they refuse to take and violate statute, taking sentenced inmates. I was told on March 30th when I submitted after we had a conference call and worked through the housing, and this housing is only up until I believe June 30th of 2021. I was told on March 30th that the payment would come within 7 to 10 business days. Today's April 27th, so 27 days later, we still have not received anything from the state of Illinois. But the check is in the mail,
Okay.
as they say.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, maybe their business days are like dog years. It's hard to get people at the state these days.
No question. No question.
Are there any specific questions for the sheriff?
And I did have, just one briefly, I did have some claims that also were not recommended that it was a miscommunication between our office and the finance director's office that were not included. So they will be here. I'm sure they will be on the next list next month. So I will be sitting in the back and be more than happy to explain the ridiculousness of our auditor.
Mr. Hess, too, before you leave, Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Chairman. Sheriff, is there a cutoff date from the state for the 2022 cars?
Cutoff date meaning?
Well, if we don't hear anything for pricing in May, they quit making them.
Oh, no. The car dealers that I have talked to, the ones that we've dealt with pretty regularly, are waiting because they can't do anything until they can't order the cars until they have the prices anyway. So
okay.
Yep.
Mr. Payton, did you wish to speak?
No, I'll hold my question.
All right. If there's nothing else, that's it.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right, we have nothing from the auditor's office. No, that seems to be standard that he doesn't show up or send any information to us. So, is there any other business to come before us?
Accountability.
Hearing no other business, we do need, under new business, to set salaries for elected officials for the coming term. The first agenda item is setting the salary for the county sheriff. As I mentioned, executive committee yesterday, some of you were in that committee and you may have seen that. We have a bit of a situation in terms of the sheriff's salary. The legislature in the last session passed a law that implemented some requirements in terms of a sheriff's salary, and at the same time, the Illinois Constitution has a limitation in terms of what can be done with the sheriff's salary. I'm going to ask Anita Speckman to come up, our county administrator, and speak to some of that, explain how we've worked through this. We think we have a solution to propose to you, but it took a lot of work to figure out how to clarify when the statute says one thing and the Constitution says another. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, it was a lot of communication with the state's attorney's office. And before I do anything, I want to thank Terry Gowdy because, you know, I send an initial request when I first find out. Well, by the time we get those answers back, it leads to another question. But she was very, very helpful in helping lay this out. And I may have to make her get up yet again. We'll see if I can't work my way through this. There are 3 issues with the statute related to the sheriff's salary. The ILCS 5/3-6007 that set the sheriff's salary, and it's at the bottom of that page. I think you should have it in your packet, right? The bottom lays out. So it was signed April 19th, and it sets the salary at 80% of the salary set for the state's attorney, and the state shall furnish, if you pay that 80%, you have to pay the 80%, and if so, the state will reimburse 66 2/3 of the total salary. So what you can see in the calculation before you is this is based on the current state's attorney salary. The current state's attorney salary is $183,434. 80% would be $146,000. The state would reimburse $97,000, and Kankakee County, our general fund, would pick up $48,915. That's based on the state's attorney salary effective currently. The sheriff's salary is currently $105,000, $105,055. So it'd be a reduction of $56,000 to the general fund, which sounds easy enough, except that there are a few things. The statute is effective immediately, yet the Constitution says that any increase or decrease in the salary of an elected official shall not take place during the term of that elected official. So even though this revision is effective immediately, Terry's advice is that it be effective 12/1/2022 with the new term. So that was our first issue. Second, we must pay 80% to receive the state of Illinois reimbursement. The state's attorney salary is set is effective July 1st of every year. Actually, the treasurer's office receives a salary reimbursement form from the Department of Revenue annually, setting the state's attorney's salary. And we currently pay the public defender based on that. And now we assume that the salary reimbursement form would also add the sheriff's salary to that as well. We don't get that till the second or third week of July. Yet the salary for the sheriff for the new term has to be set by law 180 days before the date of the beginning of the term. So by June 4th, we have to set the sheriff's salary, but we don't know what that's going to be until sometime mid-July. Easy peasy.
Wow.
So, and if we don't do it right and use the right amount, we will lose our reimbursement. So that's a problem. So what Terry recommends is that we have a motion to set the sheriff's salary at 80% of the state's attorney's salary as indicated by the annual Department of Revenue salary reimbursement notice. So we would use this. What will happen is, that's the other thing that's a little bit different. Historically, the sheriff's salary is set for the term at a fixed amount. It will, moving forward, change every year with the COLA notice from the Department of Revenue. So by just indicating that we're always going to follow this 80%, the state's attorney's salary, that will change annually on July 1st. What it will also mean that the salary would be set December 1st of 2022. It will change effective July 1st of 2022, and then every July 1st by making that particular motion. In Terry's opinion, in that way, what we can do is comply with all these issues within the new law.
Mr. Hess, did you wish to?
Yes.
Just a minute, let me put, there we go.
I'll make a motion to fix the sheriff's salary for the term of 12/1 of 2022 through 11/30 of 2026 at 80% of the state's attorney's salary as indicated by the annual Illinois Department Revenue salary reimbursement notice.
Mr.
And that
Long,
should be effective 4/19 of 2022, correct?
It will be effective 12/1/2022.
But I mean, this new statute was 4/19 of 2022.
Yes, it is.
All right, Mr. Long seconds that. Let's have discussion, because this gets so complicated. I'm sure some of you still have some questions. And maybe it's so complicated you're going to simply praise Anita again.
Well, it's all Terry.
And Carrie for working us through this. I think we've got an excellent proposal here, and we've just had a really challenging process to go through to get here. Are there questions? If there are no questions, a roll call vote would be in order then.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson? Aye. Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Aye. Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Anita. Vote aye.
Mr. Raymond?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we move to the county clerk.
The county clerk and the county treasurer are paid the same currently, and we're recommending the same. What you'll see in front of you, and that's the top 2/3 of the page that is in your packet. And so using the UCCI, they do an annual salary survey, and it is optional to respond, but I use that kind of as a basis, and then I sort by population, so that what we look at is counties that are similar in size to Kankakee County. So that's what you see in the big gray box or in the big black box around those numbers. Those are the counties and the amounts that I used for the comparison. And then I used both the average, and I calculated a compa ratio, which a compa ratio is used in HR and it compares the salary that you're looking at with the median or average, essentially the midpoint of everything else in your comparison. So if you look at the black box, the difference between the midpoint of the range of the highest and lowest is either $98,000 or $95,000. Both for the county clerk, it's $98,000. For the county treasurer, it's $95,000. And so the compa ratio for our county clerk and our county treasurer is at 73 and 75% of that midpoint. So about 25% lower than comparable counties. Make sense? So from there, what was recommended as your proposal in front of you would be to increase those two salaries by 3% each year during the term of those. That will increase them 12%. It gets them up to, as you can see, by 2026, $80,580, an increase of $8,986 for each of them over the term of, over their term, 4-year term.
Is there a motion? Can we deal with these individually, or should we combine them?
You can combine it if you want, or individually, it's up to you.
All right, is there a motion to combine and approve this proposal? Ms. Dunhill, Mr. Swanson. Any discussion on the proposal? Ms. Weber.
Thank you. Is the stipend part of the motion?
Yes. The stipend has to be part of the motion now per state law that just changed. We have to note the stipend, and actually, we need to make that notation for the sheriff as well. Because when we report now, we have to have the stipend. It's a new law. But we don't determine the stipend. We just have to note it. It's strange.
And in the sheriff's case, they're taking the money out of the personal property replacement tax, too.
Yeah. So is that $6,250 or $6,500 as well, stipend?
We don't determine the stipend. It historically has been $6,500, but that's not to say that the state wouldn't pay a different stipend. As long as I've been in county government, it's been 6,500. Sheriff or somebody that's been here longer, probably coroner, you can tell me what it's been longer than the last 10 years, but,
It was cut a half at one time.
okay.
Mr. Wheeler?
I question, could we have the motion be plus 6,500 state of Illinois stipend or current stipend rate? In the resolution, you see where I'm going with that? Leave us the flexibility in case they change it.
I would
or holiday it or
say
something.
that would be appropriate if the maker of the motion approves that. Maker of the motion approves that, the second approves that. All right. Any other questions on the motion? A roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Is there any other old business or new business? Mr. Hess?
Do we need to change the sheriff's then and add on there the state mandated stipend? That motion that I made?
Would you think it would be?
Terry or John?
Mr. Wheeler, you were,
It should probably be included, yes.
Can we do that by just having the motion and the second acknowledge that? Can we? That's the question.
I will add that to my motion, that whatever the state mandated stipend is to be added.
and the second approves that? All right. Then I think that's going to be the recommendation that goes to, I will rule that's the recommendation going to the full board.
Full board.
The full board can then make the final vote. If there is no other business, is there a motion? Mr. Hess, motion to adjourn. Mr. Fedler, seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.